Welcome to Night Lesson. Relax and learn along the way.
Intro: The Zombie Discovery. There is a fungus that turns ants into living zombies. It takes over the nervous system. It controls the muscles. It forces the ant to climb to precisely the right height, and then it lets it die, exactly where its spores can travel the farthest. This is not science fiction. This is happening right now, in every humid forest on Earth. The fungus beneath your feet, right now as you listen to this, is older than the Roman Empire. It survived the dinosaurs. It communicates with thousands of trees at once, and scientists are seriously asking, does it think? Welcome to this night lesson, a place where we contemplate the quiet wonders of the world in the gentle light of the moon. Here there is no hurry, only the quiet unfolding of knowledge and the gentle melody of discovery. On this journey, we will delve deep into a realm that lies beneath us, thinks above us, and might just change our entire understanding of what life means. We will eavesdrop on the secret conversations of trees, conducted over an underground network of fungal threads. We will witness how fungi transform matter into life, and life back into matter, the eternal cycle of the forest. And we will glimpse a future where these humble organisms could help us heal our world. But our journey does not begin with a gentle whisper, but with a quiet scream. The silent drama of a single ant in a tropical rainforest. Imagine an ant whose will is no longer its own. An invisible thread pulls it along a final, eerie path, controlled by a fungus growing inside it, making it a puppet. This unsettling spectacle, however, is just a single note in a vast hidden symphony playing out beneath our feet. It is a taste of a kingdom whose subterranean network connects entire forests and whose age far surpasses human history. A realm that communicates in a language we are only just beginning to decipher. Our journey into this hidden realm has just begun. From the uncanny precision of a single puppet, we now move deeper into the great network that weaves all life in the forest together. Chapter 1: The Forgotten Kingdom. Chapter 1: The Forgotten Kingdom. How do we define the world around us? We draw lines, create categories, give things names to bring order to the vast, immeasurable chaos of life. We say plant, and think of green leaves stretching toward the light. We say animal, and imagine movement, eyes observing the world, a mouth taking in food. For centuries, indeed for millennia, this division seemed sufficient. Anything that was rooted silently in the ground and did not run away was assigned to the kingdom of plants. And so the fungi, these silent, often hidden beings, lived for a long time under a false flag, classified in a kingdom to which they never truly belonged. They were a forgotten kingdom, hiding in plain sight. To understand their true nature, we must embark on a journey far, far back into the past. Further back than the first dinosaurs. Further back than the first fish that crawled from the water onto land. We travel back to a time about 1.5 billion years ago. The Earth then is a strange, almost alien place. The continents have a different shape, the air a different composition. There are no forests rustling in the wind, no meadows dotted with flowers. The land is barren, a silent world of rock and stone, perhaps coated here and there with a thin, moist layer of bacteria. In the oceans, life is already pulsing in simple forms, but the land lies still and waiting. In this primordial water, this cradle of life, the first complex cells, the eukaryotes, evolved, and from a common ancestor of these cells, 3 great paths of life diverged. One path led to the animals, another to the plants, and a third, often overlooked path led to the fungi. So they are not primitive plants or a strange offshoot of the animal kingdom. They are an equally ancient and venerable line of life that has evolved parallel to us. They were here long before the first land plants, which began to tentatively green the continents about 500 million years ago. The fungi were possibly the true pioneers of the land, preparing the barren rock and releasing the first nutrients for the plants that would follow them. They are the ancient architects of the soils we know today. Despite this ancient and independent origin, it took an astonishingly long time in our human science for this truth to be recognized, in textbooks, in universities, in the collective understanding of the natural sciences. Fungi were considered a subgroup of plants well into the 20th century. They were called lower plants, because they lacked typical features like leaves, stems, and flowers, and did not perform photosynthesis. It was a convenient but inaccurate box. It was not until 1969 a time of great social and scientific upheaval, that the American ecologist Robert Whittaker proposed a radical innovation, a system of 5 kingdoms of life. Alongside plants, animals, and the simple protists and monorans, he officially elevated fungi to the status of their own, fully fledged kingdom. The kingdom of fungi. It was not a sudden discovery, but the result of decades of careful observation. Scientists had long noticed the differences, but it took this decisive step to break the old dogma. The fungi had finally received their rightful place in the great library of life. So what makes a fungus so fundamentally different? What was the evidence so compelling that it overturned a centuries-old system? One of the most important clues is found at the microscopic level, in the basic architecture of their cells. The cells of a plant are surrounded by a rigid wall made of cellulose. Cellulose is the material from which wood and paper are made, a stable but relatively simple structure of sugar molecules. Now, if you look at the cell of a fungus under a microscope, you will also find a rigid wall. But it is not made of cellulose. It is made of chitin. Chitin. This word may sound foreign, but we have all encountered the substance. It is the same resilient yet flexible material that forms the shell of a beetle, the shell of a shrimp, or the wings of a dragonfly. It is the material of the exoskeleton of insects and crustaceans. Here, a deep and unexpected kinship is revealed. The delicate, soft body of a forest mushroom is, at a cellular level, more closely related to a ladybug than to the daisy growing next to it. This fundamental biochemical signature is irrefutable proof of their distinctiveness. They are not plants. They are something entirely different. The second major difference lies in how they feed. A plant is a producer. It uses the energy of sunlight to create its own food, its own sugar, from carbon dioxide and water through photosynthesis. It is self-sufficient. An animal is a consumer. It must eat other organisms, plants or other animals. To obtain energy, it takes food into its body and digests it internally. The fungus does neither. It does not photosynthesize. It has no chlorophyll to give it a green color. It also has no mouth and no stomach. A fungus is a master of external digestion. Imagine a fine network of threads, the so-called mycelium, spreading through the soil, through a piece of dead wood, or through an old leaf. These threads, the hyphae, are the true bodies of the fungus. When they encounter a food source, be it dead organic material or the roots of a plant, they secrete powerful enzymes from their tips. These enzymes are like an externalized stomach. They break down the complex matter outside the fungal body, splitting it into small, simple nutrient molecules. Only then, when the food has been pre-digested outside, does the fungus absorb these dissolved nutrients through its cell walls. It doesn't eat. It, in a sense, drinks its environment after having prepared it. This unique mode of nutrition makes fungi the great recyclers of the planet, the tireless janitors who return dead material to the cycle of life. When we talk about fungi, most of us think of the visible part, the cap and stem of a mushroom or a toadstool. But that is just the fruit, comparable to an apple on a vast invisible tree. The actual organism, the mycelium, lives hidden underground or within wood and can reach enormous sizes, and the diversity of this hidden world is almost unimaginable. The numbers provided by modern mycology, the science of fungi, are breathtaking and humbling. To date, scientists have described and named about 150,000 different species of fungi. That sounds like a lot, but it is only a tiny fraction of what is presumed to exist. Current estimates suggest that there are between 2 and 8 million species of fungi on our planet. This means that for every species of fungus we know, there are at least 10, perhaps even 20 or more, that we have not yet discovered. Over 90% of the fungal kingdom is still terra incognita to us, an unknown world. They live in places we would never expect, in the depths of the oceans where they grow on whale bones, in the icy deserts of Antarctica, where they survive inside rocks, in the radioactively contaminated ruins of Chernobyl, where some species have learned to feed on radiation. They are in the air we breathe, on our skin, in our bodies. This vast undiscovered kingdom is all around us and within us. We are only at the very beginning of understanding the true meaning and scale of this kingdom. Every walk in the forest, every handful of soil, is an encounter with this hidden universe. And as we slowly piece together the names and categories, a world is revealed that is more complex, more interconnected and more wondrous than we could have long imagined. We are just scratching the surface, literally. And beneath this surface, in the quiet darkness of the soil, the vast network waits to reveal its further secrets. Chapter 2: The Wood Wide Web. Chapter 2: The Wood Wide Web. Imagine you are standing in an ancient forest. Light falls in patches through the canopy, dancing on the moss-covered ground. A gentle breeze blows, and the leaves above you whisper. It smells of damp earth, of the sweet scent of decay and the fresh resin of pine trees. Everything on the surface seems to exist in a state of peaceful, individual being, each tree an entity unto itself, quietly reaching for the sky. But this silence is deceptive, for beneath your feet, hidden in the darkness of the soil, a vast living network is pulsing. An invisible world of communication, trade, and mutual aid, so complex and far-reaching that scientists have reverently named it the Wood Wide Web. Quote, "The main actor in this subterranean drama is an organism we often overlook or only perceive as a fruiting body on the surface, the fungus. But not just any fungus. We are talking about mycorrhizal fungi. The word comes from Greek. Myx for fungus and rhiza for root. A fungus root. This description is the core of one of the most fundamental partnerships on our planet. It is estimated that over 90% of all land plants live in such a symbiosis. It is not the exception but the overwhelming rule of plant life. The fungi form an unimaginably fine network of threads called hyphae. A single cubic centimeter of forest soil can contain kilometers of these gossamer-thin filaments, winding through the earth, around stones, and between grains of sand. This network, the mycelium, is the true body of the fungus. It connects the roots of individual trees, often dozens of them, sometimes even trees of different species. An old beech tree can thus be connected to a young spruce, a maple to a birch, through a shared underground system. What drives this universal connection? It is a trade as old as the plants themselves, a barter from which both sides profit. The tree, with its leaves or needles, is a master of photosynthesis. It captures sunlight and converts it into sugar, into pure energy in the form of carbon. But a portion of this valuable energy, up to 30%, the tree willingly gives away. It directs the sugar through its roots directly into the fungal network. It is a payment for a vital service. The fungus, in turn, is a master of mining. Its fine hyphae can penetrate pores and crevices that are inaccessible to the much thicker tree roots. It unlocks minerals like phosphorus and nitrogen that are bound in the soil and collects water from the tiniest cracks. It then channels these vital nutrients and water directly into the tree's roots. The fungus increases the reach of a tree's root system by 100 to 1,000 times. It is both a supply line and an extended digestive tract for the forest. A perfect symbiosis. The fungus provides minerals and water. The tree provides sugar. For a long time, this was thought to be a simple, bilateral relationship between one fungus and one plant. But in the forests of British Columbia, Canada, a young researcher named Suzanne Simard began to question this assumption. She spent years, even decades, listening to the silent conversation of the trees. She suspected that the fungal network not only supplied individual trees, but connected them all into a community. To prove her theory, she designed an ingenious experiment. She selected a group of trees, an old majestic Douglas fir, surrounded by younger saplings, both Douglas firs and birches. Into the trunk of the large tree, which she would later call a mother tree, she injected a tiny amount of radioactive carbon in the form of carbon dioxide. The tree absorbed this marked carbon and converted it into marked sugar through photosynthesis. Simard waited. With a Geiger counter, she then went to the surrounding trees. The result was breathtaking. The ticking of the counter revealed that the radioactive sugar from the mother tree was not only in its own roots, but had flowed through the underground fungal network to the neighboring saplings. And the transfer was not random. The mother tree sent more carbon to the seedlings that were in the deepest shade and struggling the most. What's more, she was able to prove that mother trees recognize their own offspring and preferentially supply them with nutrients, almost as if they were nursing their children. It was the first scientific proof of targeted, communal behavior in the forest. An older, established tree was using its resources to help the next generation survive. This discovery changed everything. The forest was no longer a battlefield of competing individuals, but a cooperative community. The trees talked to each other, not with words, but with chemical signals and nutrient flows mediated by the fungal network. If a tree is attacked by pests, it can send warning signals through the network to its neighbors, who can then ramp up their own defense mechanisms. When a tree dies, it slowly releases its remaining nutrients into the network, a final gift to the community that sustained it throughout its life. The trade routes are dynamic, adapting to the seasons. Samad's research on birches and Douglas firs showed that in summer, when deciduous trees like the birch are in full leaf, they send excess sugar to the coniferous trees, which might get less light in the understory. In spring and autumn, however, when the birch has no leaves but the evergreen Douglas fir can still photosynthesize, the flow reverses. The Douglas fir now supports the birch. It is a system of give and take that ensures the stability of the entire ecosystem. But as in any complex society, it is not all cooperation. The network can also be exploited. There are plants such as the white pines api that do not photosynthesize at all. They have no chlorophyll. Instead, they hack into the mycorrhizal network and siphon off the sugar that other trees have produced for the fungi. They are pure parasites, living off the system without giving anything back. Certain fungal species can also abuse the network for their own purposes, spreading diseases or draining resources without providing anything in return. The Wood Wide Web is therefore not a pure utopia, but a complex system of trade, cooperation, but also theft and deception. Suzanne Samad's findings were revolutionary and initially met with massive resistance, especially from the forestry industry. The prevailing model was based on the idea of competition. Forests were seen as a collection of tree trunks competing for light and resources. The practice of clear-cutting, where all trees except the most economically valuable ones are removed, was based on this assumption. Samad's research suggested that this practice destroys the vital underground network and weakens the resilience of the entire forest. By removing the old mother trees, you sever the central hubs of the network and deprive the young trees of their most important source of support. It took years for her work to receive the recognition it deserved, slowly initiating a shift in thinking in forestry. So the next time we walk through a forest, we can remember what is happening beneath our feet. Every step takes us over an invisible, pulsating web of life. An old tree is not just a tree. It is a hub, a node, a source of knowledge and nourishment connected to hundreds of other living things. It remembers past droughts, stores water, and shares its wisdom in the form of chemical signals. These discoveries raise a profound question that takes us far beyond biology. If trees communicate via a fungal network, if they selectively send nutrients to those in need, recognize and provide for their own offspring, and warn their neighbors of danger, can we not call this a form of social behavior? Is it a type of intelligence that we have failed to recognize simply because it operates on a timescale unimaginably slow to us and speaks a language we are only just beginning to decipher? The lines between what we consider conscious and unconscious, intelligent and instinctive, begin to blur the deeper we look into the hidden world of the forest. And with each new discovery, it becomes clearer that we are only at the beginning of understanding the true nature of these complex communities. Chapter 3: Intelligence Without a Brain. Chapter 3: Intelligence Without a Brain. What if intelligence had no fixed form? What if it did not reside in the folded convolutions of a brain, but could flow, spread, and pulse like a slow golden wave? Let us imagine a creature that lives in the damp, shady corners of a forest floor. It glows with a sunny, almost unnatural yellow. It is not a plant, not an animal, and despite its name, not a true fungus either. It is a slime mold, specifically Physarum polycephalum, which means the many-headed. Its entire body is a single giant cell, enclosed by one membrane but filled with millions of nuclei floating freely in a common fluid, the cytoplasm. It has no limbs, no eyes, no nervous system, and yet it seems to think. This luminous amorphous being moves by a method called protoplasmic streaming. Inside it, the cytoplasm pulses rhythmically back and forth, a tidal movement that transports nutrients and allows the organism to change its shape, to expand and crawl across the forest floor. It pushes out finger-like extensions, called pseudopods, into the world, sensing its environment, searching for food, bacteria, spores, and decaying organic matter. If it finds a food source, the flow in that direction intensifies. If it hits a dead end or a harmful substance, it retreats. A simple principle of attraction and repulsion that nevertheless leads to astonishingly complex behavior. In the year 2000, Japanese researcher Toshiyuki Nakagaki decided to put this seemingly simple logic to the test. He wondered if this decentralized form of decision-making was sufficient to solve a classic human intelligence problem. A maze. The experiment was elegantly simple. Nakagaki and his team built a small maze in a petri dish, its floor covered with a nutrient gel. At the entrance of the maze, they placed a piece of the yellow slime mold. At the exit, they placed its favorite food, an oat flake. Then the waiting began. The slime mold slowly came to life. It began to spread, its yellow veins flowing into the passages of the maze. At first it explored indiscriminately. It filled every corridor, every turn, every dead end with its pulsating mass. It had become the maze. Over hours, the network expanded until the entire available space was threaded with the luminous organism. It had not yet found a solution. It had merely fully grasped the problem. But then, something remarkable happened. After its tendrils had reached the oat flake at the exit, a process of optimization began. The slime mold started to retreat. The veins that led to dead ends grew weaker. The nutrient flow in these unproductive paths was reduced, and the protoplasm slowly withdrew, leaving only an invisible film of slime behind. At the same time, the veins that formed the most direct path between the original starting point and the food source were strengthened. They grew thicker. The pulse of cytoplasm within them became stronger and faster. Within a few hours, the slime mold had dismantled all superfluous connections and formed a single thick, pulsating vein that represented the shortest and most efficient path through the maze. Without eyes to see the way, without a brain to analyze the map, this single-celled creature had solved the puzzle, solely through the physical laws of flow and reinforcement. This experiment opened the door to a completely new perspective on intelligence. But it was only the beginning. Nakagaki's team decided to increase the complexity. What if the problem wasn't a simple maze, but one of the most complex networks created by humans in the world? They took a flat dish and recreated the geography of the region around Tokyo. At the locations of major cities and urban centers, Tokyo itself, Yokohama, Kawasaki, and many others, they placed oat flakes. Then they placed the slime mold on the point corresponding to Tokyo's central station. Again, the organism spread out, fanning in all directions in search of the scattered food sources. It connected all the oat flakes, forming a dense, inefficient web. And again, the process of refinement began. The slime mold optimized its network, strengthening the most important connections and allowing unnecessary ones to wither. After about 26 hours, a stable pattern had formed. When the researchers compared the result with the actual map of the Tokyo rail network, the similarity was astounding. The slime mold had not only created a near-exact copy of the system planned and built by engineers over decades, but in some places it had even improved it. Its network was just as efficient but more resilient to disruptions. If a connection in its network was severed, the organism could quickly find and reinforce alternative routes, a quality that still presents major challenges for human traffic planners. A single cell had solved a network optimization problem that occupies entire teams of highly intelligent people. But to call something intelligent, the ability to solve problems may not be enough. What about memory? Can a being without a single synapse remember? Another research team investigated this question. They subjected a slime mold moving across an agar plate to a regular unpleasant stimulus. A puff of cold, dry air. Every hour exactly on the hour, the organism was exposed to this shock. As expected, the slime mold slowed its growth and movement each time in response to the unpleasant stimulus. After repeating this pattern 3 times, they omitted the 4th air puff. But at the very moment the puff should have occurred, the slime mold slowed its growth on its own. It anticipated the event. It remembered the rhythm of the disturbance. This memory lasted for a few hours before gradually fading. The slime mold had learned. Scientists believe that this memory is not stored in a specific location, but is distributed throughout the organism's entire body. The periodic shocks alter the rhythm of the internal pulsing, the oscillations of the cytoplasmic flow. The body itself becomes the record of the past. The memory is not written in a neural code, but is woven into the physical structure of the organism, into the pattern of its internal tides. a form of embodied memory. These discoveries present us with a profound question, one that occupies cognitive scientists and philosophers alike. If a being solves problems that require human engineering skills, if it learns from experience and remembers past events to predict future ones, what exactly is missing for it to be considered intelligent? Perhaps our definition of intelligence is too tailored to ourselves, too tied to the presence of a central nervous system. Perhaps we are overlooking a more fundamental form of cognition that exists in the very fabric of life, an intelligence that doesn't think, but calculates, that doesn't deliberate but optimizes, that doesn't remember in thoughts but in its very form. The slime mold forces us to change our perspective. It shows us that complex, goal-directed behaviors can arise without a brain, solely through the interaction of simple rules and physical laws. It is living proof that intelligence can have many faces. It can take the form of a yellow, pulsating mass on the forest floor, just as it can exist in the interconnected roots of a forest or the complex chemical signals of a fungal mycelium. We are beginning to understand that the universe may be full of such hidden cognition, operating in systems we have previously dismissed as lifeless or purely instinctive. The intelligence of the slime mold is slow, patient, and deeply rooted in the laws of physics. It is a reminder that life finds ways to process information and respond to its environment that go far beyond what we can imagine in our brain-centric world. And just as we are only beginning to decipher the language of the forest, we are also only at the beginning of comprehending this strange and yet so fundamental form of being. Chapter 4: The Largest Living Thing on Earth. Chapter 4: The Largest Living Thing on Earth. In the vast silent forests of eastern Oregon, where the air smells of pine resin and damp earth, a being of unimaginable proportions lies hidden. On the surface, everything seems ordinary. Mighty ponderosa pines stretch their crowns to the blue sky, their carpet of needles muffling every step. Aspens tremble in the wind, their leaves a shimmering mosaic of green and gold. But beneath this idyllic surface, hidden in the darkness of the soil, an organism spreads, its true size pushing the limits of human imagination. The story of its discovery begins not with a triumphant find, but with a mystery that puzzled the foresters of the Malheur National Forest for years. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, they noticed that in certain areas of the forest, trees were mysteriously beginning to die. These were not isolated old trees following the natural cycle of life. They were entire groups, patches of dying conifers that seemed to be spreading like a creeping disease. The foresters investigated, examining the bark, analyzing the needles and the soil. Their first guess was a root rot, an aggressive tree disease spreading from one tree to the next. They mapped the affected areas, drew lines on their maps, and tried to understand the spread of this invisible plague. But something was wrong with this theory. The disease seemed to have no clear boundaries and sometimes jumped across clearings or streams. The true nature of the phenomenon was revealed only when scientists began to take samples. They collected fruiting bodies of a fungus that grew at the base of the dead trees, small honey-colored caps that sprouted from the ground in the fall. This fungus was known as the honey fungus, or Armillaria ostii, a parasite that infects and kills trees. The assumption was that they were dealing with thousands of different fungal individuals infesting the forest. To understand the pathways of the supposed disease, the researchers decided to conduct a genetic comparison. They took samples from different widely separated locations in the forest. One sample here, at the edge of a clearing, another there, a kilometer to the west, deep in the dense undergrowth, a third to the south on the other side of a small hill. They expected a variety of genetic profiles, just as one finds countless different individuals in a crowd of people. The result that came back from the lab was so unexpected that it was initially met with disbelief. The DNA analysis showed that all the samples were genetically identical. The sample from the clearing, the one from the undergrowth, and the one from the other hill, they all came from one and the same organism. It was as if one had found a hair from a person in one village and another hair from a person at the other end of the country, and discovered that both belonged to the same individual. The foresters had not been fighting thousands of infections. They had been walking on the surface of a single, gigantic living being all along. This moment changed the understanding of life on our planet. The being in the Malheur National Forest was not just large. It was the largest known living organism on Earth. Its expanse was estimated at 9.6 square kilometers. To visualize this area, you would have to line up about 1,350 soccer fields. A walk from one end of its territory to the other would take hours. A hike through forests and over hills, all within the invisible grip of this one fungus. Its body is not a compact form, as we know it from animals. It is a decentralized network that spreads through the soil. The majority of its biomass consists of a fine web of mycelial threads that permeate the earth. But its real strength and its tool for conquest are the rhizomorphs. These are thick, black, shoelace-like strands that push through the soil like an underground root system. These rhizomorphs can travel long distances, protected by a tough outer layer. When they encounter the root of a healthy tree, the slow, relentless process of conquest begins. The fungus penetrates the bark, grows between it and the wood, and slowly cuts the tree off from its supply of water and nutrients. Over years and decades, it drains the life force from the tree until it finally dies. And then, when the tree is dead, the fungus feeds on the wood, gathering energy for its further, patient expansion. The small, honey-colored mushrooms that appear in the fall are just the ephemeral fruiting bodies, releasing spores into the wind, tiny messengers carrying the genetic code of the giant. The dimensions of this organism upend our usual comparisons. We think of the blue whale, the largest animal that has ever lived, a majestic colossus up to 30-meter long and weighing nearly 200 tons. But compared to the fungus in Oregon, the blue whale is tiny, a speck of dust in the ocean of life. Even the legendary giant squid, which lives in the deepest and darkest parts of the seas, is but a fleeting shadow in comparison. These animals are complex, centralized beings with organs, a brain, and a consciousness we can surmise. The fungus, however, is a distributed intelligence, an organism whose existence spans a landscape and whose life is measured in geological time. Its age is estimated to be at least 2,400 years, but many scientists believe it is much older. Some estimates go as high as an incredible 8,650 years. This means this fungus began its life when human civilization was just taking its first steps. It was already an ancient being when the pyramids of Giza were built. It has seen the Roman Empire rise and fall. It has watched countless generations of trees grow and die, has seen the seasons come and go, millennium after millennium, in a slow, unceasing rhythm. Its growth is so slow, perhaps only a meter per year, that it is invisible to the human eye. It is a growth measured not in days or weeks, but in centuries. This immense timescale and this distributed existence raise profound questions. If this fungus is a single, contiguous individual, does it have a form of self-awareness? A single mycelial thread on its western edge is severed by a beetle. Does the part of the fungus kilometers away on its eastern border feel this disturbance? Is there a form of communication, a slow chemical signal pulsing through the vast network, carrying a message? We know from the previous chapter that fungal networks can transport information. But what does that mean on such a scale? Does this organism know its own boundaries? Does it feel where it ends and where the surrounding soil begins? Or is its existence purely reactive, a passive expansion following the laws of nutrient availability and resistance? Perhaps the question of feeling or knowing is already too human a projection. Perhaps its existence is a form of being so fundamentally different from ours that we can only describe it, but never truly understand it. It is a silent, dark giant, sleeping and breathing beneath our feet, a living testament to the fact that nature's greatest wonders are often the most hidden. Its story is not written in books, but in the slow death of trees and the tireless advance of its black rhizomorphs through the earth. And as it continues to grow, it asks us the fundamental question of what it truly means to be a single living being. Chapter 5: Zombie Apocalypse. Chapter 5: Zombie Apocalypse. Where the light of day reaches the damp forest floor only in broken rays, a spectacle unfolds that is almost unsurpassed in its complexity and precision. It is a story told not by a single organism, but by an uncanny connection between two life forms, an inseparable symbiosis that ends fatally for one of the partners. In the muted silence of the tropical undergrowth, among decaying leaves and moist earth, it all begins with an invisible touch. A single spore, tiny and inconspicuous, floats through the dense, humid air. It is a traveler with no destination, carried by the quiet currents that circulate between the gigantic tree trunks. Finally, almost by chance, it lands on the chitinous shell of an ant of the genus Camponotus, a common carpenter ant going about its daily duties. For the ant, this moment is meaningless, one more speck of dust on its body to be brushed off at the next opportunity. But this spore is not dust. It belongs to a fungus called Ophiocordyceps unilateralis, and it is the beginning of the end. The spore germinates. Using enzymes that can dissolve the ant's hard exoskeleton, a tiny germ tube grows into the insect's body. This process is silent, painless, and unnoticed. Inside the ant, the fungus begins to grow, not as a single fruiting body, but as a network of fine threads, the hyphae. At first it feeds on non-essential soft tissues, leaving the ant's organs intact. The host must survive for as long as possible. The ant suspects nothing of the alien life spreading within it. It continues its work, communicates with its sisters, gathers food, and defends the nest. But beneath the surface the takeover has long begun. The fungus continues to grow, forming a dense mycelium that spreads throughout the ant's entire body. And here, something amazing happens, a masterpiece of biological manipulation. The fungus avoids the brain. It does not infect it directly. It does not destroy it. Instead, it envelops it, isolates it from the rest of the body, and takes direct control of the muscles. It infiltrates the muscle cells and the junctions between nerves and muscles. It is as if a puppeteer were not to grasp the puppet's head, but every single string leading to its limbs. The fungus secretes chemical compounds that trigger convulsions and behavioral changes. The ant is now a prisoner in its own body, its mind intact but powerless. The colony notices the change. An infected ant begins to behave strangely. It trembles, stumbles, and loses the ability to follow the pheromone trails that organize the social life of the ant state. Its sisters recognize the danger. In an act of collective self-defense known as social immunity, healthy ants identify the sick individual. They grab it with their mandibles and carry it far away from the nest, often dozens of meters. It is an act of banishment to prevent the spread of the plague. But for this one ant it is often too late. The fungus inside it has already taken complete control. Driven by a force not its own, the ant leaves the safe path. It begins to climb, not aimlessly, but with an eerie determination. It climbs the stem of a plant, higher and higher, away from the forest floor. The fungus inside it is searching for a very specific location. It is a place with the perfect temperature and humidity for what must come next. Scientists have discovered that this spot is chosen with astonishing precision, usually on the north side of a plant, at a height of exactly 25 centimeters above the ground. Here, the humidity is ideal, and the temperature fluctuates only slightly. It is the perfect incubator. When the ant reaches this point, it is shaken by a final massive convulsion. The fungus forces its jaw muscles to clamp shut with all their might. The ant bites into the central vein on the underside of a leaf. This bite, the so-called death grip, is final. The muscles contract so forcefully that they do not release even after the ant's death. The atrophy of the jaw muscles ensures a permanent anchor. The ant's body now hangs like a macabre monument beneath the leaf, clamped to its own green tombstone. Now that the host is securely positioned, the ant dies. The fungus has achieved its goal and now consumes the remaining nutrients in the insect's body to initiate its final phase. From the back of the dead ant's head, precisely where the neck meets the head, something begins to grow. Slowly, a long, thin stalk emerges, the fruiting body of the fungus. It grows downwards towards the forest floor. At its tip, a capsule called a parathecium forms. Inside this capsule, thousands of new spores mature. When the time is right, the capsule ruptures, releasing its deadly cargo into the air. The spores rain down onto the forest floor, onto the area directly below the dead ant. A deadly circle of about 1 square meter becomes contaminated. Any ant that crosses this area risks becoming infected itself, starting the cycle anew. A single zombie ant can trigger a local epidemic and threaten an entire colony. This gruesome yet fascinating spectacle has fueled the human imagination. The idea of an organism taking over the will of another is the real-life basis for many fictional horror stories. Most famously, the world of The Last of Us. There, a variant of the cordyceps fungus is blamed for a global pandemic that brings humanity to the brink of collapse. But while the inspiration is real, The scenario is, thankfully, pure fiction for us humans. The reason for this is simple and elegant. Our body temperature. Most fungi, including Ophiocordyceps, cannot survive or spread at the high and constant temperature of the human body, around 37 degrees Celsius. Our warm blood is a highly effective shield against such specialized pathogens. Mammals are simply too hot for this particular fungus. But nature would not be nature if there were not a counter system for every system. Even this masterful parasite is not safe from enemies. There are other fungi, known as hyperparasites, that specialize in attacking Ophiocordyceps itself. They grow on the fruiting body that sprouts from the ant, preventing it from releasing spores. They essentially castrate the zombie fungus, thus breaking its life cycle. It is an arms race at the microscopic level, a battle of parasite against parasite, which ensures an ecological balance and prevents Ophiocordyceps from wiping out entire ant populations. When we consider this process, these millions of years of coevolution that have led to such incredible precision, we must question our notion of intelligence. The fungus has no brain, no nervous system, no consciousness as we understand it. And yet it performs a series of actions that are more purposeful and complex than many human plans. It navigates the body of another living being, manipulates its behavior with chemical precision, and forces it to find the perfect location for its own reproduction. Is this not a form of intelligence? A distributed systemic intelligence, not stored in a single organ, but in the genetic code, in the interaction of proteins and enzymes. It is the result of an infinitely long, slow process of trial and error that we call evolution. Every single variable, the height of the climb, the orientation to the north, the timing of the death grip, has been optimized over countless generations. The result is a biological algorithm of terrifying perfection. The story of the zombie ant is more than just a creepy anecdote from nature. It is a lesson about the hidden forces that shape life. It shows us that control does not always have to emanate from a central brain, and that the boundaries between individual organisms can sometimes blur in the strangest and most uncanny ways. It reminds us that beneath the seemingly peaceful surface of the forest, a constant invisible struggle for survival rages on, fought with weapons we are only just beginning to understand. And in this silent drama, one of nature's deepest truths is revealed: that life inevitably depends on death, and even in the most horrific end, there lies a new beginning. Chapter 6: Fungi Save the World. Chapter 6: Fungi Save the World. This idea, that healing can arise from destruction, is not mere poetry. It is a fundamental process of nature, and in this process, fungi play a leading role that we are only slowly beginning to grasp in its full extent. Beyond merely decomposing deadwood and leaves, they possess the almost magical ability to heal the deepest wounds we have inflicted upon our planet. This is the field of mycoremediation, the fungus-led restoration of ecosystems. A pioneer in this field, mycologist Paul Stamets, has shown that the enzymatic power of fungi extends far beyond organic matter. He saw them not just as decomposers, but as alchemists capable of breaking down complex and toxic man-made molecules into harmless components. Imagine a pile of soil saturated with diesel oil. It is black, sticky, has a pungent smell, and is lethal to most life forms. In a famous experiment, Stamets took just such a contaminated pile of soil and inoculated it with the mycelium of oyster mushrooms. Beside it, he left control piles that were either untreated or treated with traditional bacterial cultures for cleanup. What happened next was a quiet, slow miracle. While the other piles remained dark and lifeless, the soil inoculated with fungal mycelium began to change. Beneath the surface, a fine white network, the mycelium, spread, permeating the soil. The hyphae, these tiny threads, secreted a whole arsenal of enzymes. These enzymes are the tools fungi use to decompose wood, breaking down lignin and cellulose. But it turned out that these same enzymes also have a remarkable similarity to the chemical bonds in hydrocarbons like oil and pesticides. The mycelium did what it always does. It ate. It unlocked the molecular locks of the diesel molecules, broke the long chains, and metabolized them. After just a few weeks, the first fruiting bodies, the familiar oyster mushrooms, began to sprout from the once toxic soil. They were large, healthy, and full of life. And when the analysis was completed after 8 weeks, the result was breathtaking. 95% of the toxic hydrocarbons were gone. They had not just been moved elsewhere but had been broken down into their harmless components. The soil was no longer black and sticky but smelled earthy again and was teeming with worms and insects. An ecosystem had been reborn. This ability has immense implications. After disasters like the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico or the nuclear contamination in Fukushima, fungi have been discussed as potential helpers. They could accumulate radioactive isotopes like cesium-137 in their fruiting bodies, thus removing them from the soil. They could decompose the vast slicks of crude oil that cover coasts and seabeds. It is a quiet biological solution to our loudest, most mechanical problems. And the challenges are not getting smaller. Our modern world has created a material that seems made to last forever, plastic. Yet even here, the fungal kingdom finds an answer. In the Amazon rainforest, a fungus called Pestilodiopsis microspora was discovered. What is special about it is its ability to decompose polyurethane, one of the most common plastics, and it even does so under anaerobic conditions, that is, without oxygen. This means it could work at the bottom of landfills, buried deep under layers of waste, quietly dissolving our most persistent legacy. It is a glimmer of hope, a reminder that the biological cycles of the earth are more resourceful than our chemical dead ends. This healing power of fungi, however, is not limited to the planet. It extends deep into our own bodies, into our own biology. The history of modern medicine is inextricably linked to a fungus. In 1928, the Scottish scientist Alexander Fleming noticed something strange in his laboratory. One of his petri dishes, in which he was growing Staphylococci bacteria, had been accidentally contaminated with a mold, Penicillium notatum. Normally, this would be an annoyance, a failed experiment, but Fleming noticed that a clear zone had formed around the mold. The bacteria could not grow near it. The fungus was producing a substance that was lethal to them. This substance was penicillin, the first antibiotic. This accidental discovery revolutionized medicine and saved countless millions of lives. It was the beginning of the antibiotic age, a direct consequence of the silent chemical warfare that fungi have been waging against bacteria for millions of years. We had merely learned to listen and to use their weapons for ourselves. Today, we are experiencing a new renaissance in fungal medicine. At renowned institutions like Johns Hopkins University and Imperial College London, the potential of psilocybin, the active compound in so-called magic mushrooms, is being intensively researched. Far from its reputation as a recreational drug, psilocybin is showing remarkable efficacy in clinical trials for treating severe depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and addiction. It seems to have the ability to break up rigid negative thought patterns in the brain and create new neural connections. It is as if it allows the mind to reboot itself, to break out of entrenched paths, and find new perspectives. Once again, a fungus heals. This time not the soil or a bacterial infection, but the deep wounds of the human psyche. And the pharmacy of the fungal kingdom is far vaster. The cholesterol-lowering drug lovastatin, one of the most prescribed medications in the world, originally came from molds like Aspergillus terris. The drug cyclosporin, which prevents organ rejection after transplants and thus gives countless people a second chance at life, was isolated from the fungus Tolypocladium inflatum. Long before modern science isolated these molecules in laboratories, cultures around the world knew of the healing power of certain fungi. In traditional Chinese and Siberian medicine, mushrooms like reishi, chaga, and lion's mane have been revered for millennia. Reishi is known as the mushroom of immortality, strengthening the immune system. Chaga, which grows on birch trunks like burnt charcoal, is valued for its anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties. And lion's mane, which looks like a white cascade of icicles, is traditionally used to enhance cognitive function and the nervous system. Today, modern research is confirming much of this ancient wisdom. Studies show that these fungi contain compounds that indeed have anti-tumor effects, protect nerve cells from damage, and can stimulate the growth of new neural pathways. From healing the planet and the body, we now move to building our world. The same networking binding power of mycelium that holds the forest floor together can be used to create entirely new sustainable materials. Instead of styrofoam, a petroleum-based foam that takes hundreds of years to decompose, we can grow packaging from fungi. Companies like Ecovative Design in New York have perfected this process. They take agricultural waste, like hemp herds or corn stover, and mix it with fungal mycelium. This mixture is placed in a mold, for example, the shape of packaging for a computer. In the dark, at the right temperature and humidity, the mycelium begins to grow. It consumes the agricultural waste and spins its dense white network throughout the entire material, binding it firmly together. After a few days, the process is stopped by gentle heating. The result is a firm, lightweight, and shock-absorbent material that is perfectly shaped. Major companies like IKEA and Dell are already using this technology to protect their products. The most beautiful part of this story is the end of the life cycle. When the packaging is no longer needed, you can simply toss it into the garden. Within a few weeks, it completely decomposes and becomes nutritious soil again. It closes the loop. This material can be used to make more than just packaging. Bricks, insulation panels, furniture, and even leather-like textiles can be grown from it. It represents a fundamentally different way of producing. We no longer manufacture things, we grow them. It is a partnership with an organism that has been a master of building structures for eons. From the contaminated soil they clean, to the diseases they cure, to the sustainable materials they form. Fungi offer elegant biological answers to the most complex problems of our time. They show us a path not based on exploitation and waste, but on cooperation, regeneration, and cyclical thinking. They are not just silent workers in the shadows, but active partners in a future we are only just learning to shape. Their quiet lessons on decomposition and reconstruction could be the key, not only to our survival, but to a truly sustainable flourishing. And as we decipher their chemistry, we may also begin to understand their deeper wisdom. Chapter 7. The Conversation of the Forests. Chapter 7. The Conversation of the Forests. But what does this wisdom, which lies in decomposition and reconstruction, sound like? Does it speak in a language our ears can perceive, or does it whisper in a form we are only just beginning to decipher? The silence of a forest is an illusion. Beneath the surface, hidden from our senses, a constant, uninterrupted conversation is taking place. An exchange as old as the trees themselves and as complex as the life it sustains. It often begins with a quiet, almost imperceptible cry for help. Imagine an old Douglas fir, its bark pierced by the tiny, relentless jaws of the bark beetle. For the tree, this is an attack, an injury. Its response is immediate, but not limited to itself. As it begins to produce resin to repel the invaders, it simultaneously sends out a message, a chemical signature of stress. This message travels not through the air but through the earth, through the dense network of mycorrhizal fungi that connect its roots with those of its neighbors. This signal is not a vague impulse. It is specific biochemical information. The molecules released by the tree carry the exact identifier of the threat. They travel through the fine hyphae of the fungal network, an invisible dispatch passed from root to root. A neighboring larch, perhaps 10 meters away, receives this message. Although it has not yet been attacked, its system understands the warning. In response, it preemptively begins to mobilize its own defenses. It increases its production of terpenes and phenols, bitter, resinous compounds that are inedible or even toxic to the beetles. When the swarms of insects later reach it, they do not find an unsuspecting, unprepared plant, but a fortress whose walls are already raised. This is not a theory, not a poetic metaphor. It is a scientifically proven process, a silent chemical conversation about threat and defense. It is the foundation of the forest's collective resilience. A single tree may be vulnerable, but a connected forest is a vigilant, communicating superorganism that stands up for its members. The fungus here acts as a messenger, as the nervous system that connects the individual members into a whole. It transmits not only nutrients, but also vital information for survival. It is a slow, deliberate form of communication that pulses to the rhythm of growth and the seasons. But what if there is another, faster layer to this conversation? What if, besides chemical messengers, something else flows through the fungal highways? In 2022, researcher Andrew Adamatsky at the University of Exeter turned his attention to this very question. He was fascinated by the idea that the activity within a mycelial network could be more than just passive transport. With the finest electrodes, he delved into the living network of fungi and began to listen, not with his ears, but with sensitive instruments that recorded electrical potential fluctuations. What he found was astounding. The mycelium was not electrically silent. It generated spikes, tiny electrical impulses that flickered through the network. And these impulses were anything but random. They occurred in patterns, in clusters of activity, followed by periods of relative calm. Adamatsky analyzed the frequency and amplitude of these spike trains and began to compare them to the structures of human languages. The similarities were striking. The distribution of the lengths of these pulse words matched the distribution of word lengths in human languages. He was able to identify a vocabulary of up to 50 different words, that is, 50 recurring distinct patterns of electrical activity. The media eagerly picked up on this discovery. Headlines proclaimed that fungi could talk, that we were on the verge of deciphering a completely new form of intelligence. But the scientific community urged caution, and this caution is itself part of the coming order of knowledge. Because the crucial question is, what do we define as communication? Is every complex pattern of signals equivalent to a language, or are we merely observing the complex noise of a biological system reacting to its environment? A human heart beats in a complex rhythm that changes with exertion or rest. But we would not say the heart is speaking to us. It is a functional process. Could the electrical impulses in the mycelium be something similar? Perhaps a certain pattern signals the discovery of a new food source, another an injury to the network, a third the contact with the roots of a new tree. It would be a highly complex form of signal processing, a kind of internal machine language of the fungus, but not necessarily conscious. Chapter 8 What is life? What is mind? Chapter 8 What is life? What is mind? This great conversation taking place beneath our feet forces us to question our own vocabulary. It turns our most carefully constructed boxes upside down and shakes out their contents until the labels fall off and we are no longer sure what belongs where. What happens when the grammar of this ancient language is so foreign and yet so profound that it challenges our most fundamental concepts like intelligence, life, and consciousness? Let's just think of the slime mold Physarum polycephalum, whose amazing problem-solving and learning abilities we have already encountered. This being without a brain, which solves mazes and remembers future events, compels us to see intelligence not as the property of an organ, but as a process, as the ability of a system to process information and respond to it meaningfully. And this challenge extends to the definition of life itself. We love our categories: animal, plant, fungus. It gives us a sense of order, but fungi do not fit neatly into any of these boxes. They do not photosynthesize like plants. They derive their energy by digesting their environment. But they also do not actively hunt and move like most animals. Their cell walls are not made of cellulose like plants, but of chitin, the same material that makes up the shells of insects and crustaceans. They are their own kingdom, the third great kingdom of eukaryotes, as different from plants as we animals are. They are not one or the other. They are the argument against the idea that everything must be either one or the other. They exist in the in-between, in the uncategorizable, reminding us that life is not a set of boxes, but a continuum, a fluid transition of forms and strategies. And in this continuum lies perhaps the deepest and most uncomfortable question of all. If we imagine this long, unbroken chain of life stretching back billions of years, where exactly does what we call mind begin? Does it begin with us, the primates, with our complex brains, our language, and our self-reflection? Does it begin with mammals, with insects and their astonishing collective behaviors, or does it perhaps begin much, much earlier? If the slime mold, a single cell, can process information and make decisions, does it not possess a spark of what we call mental activity? And if a mycelial network communicates over hectares, distributes resources, detects threats, and warns its partner plants, is that not also a form of distributed collective mind? The line we draw so clearly between thinking and non-thinking beings, between conscious subjects and inanimate objects, becomes porous and permeable under the silent growing pressure of the fungal kingdom. Where on the scale from a single-celled organism to a slime mold, a fungal network, and a human brain do we draw the line and say, here, right here, experience begins? Before this was only mechanics, after this is perception. The truth is we do not know, and perhaps the line is not there at all. This uncertainty leads us into one of the oldest and most fascinating debates in philosophy, the idea of panpsychism. Philosophers like Thomas Nagel, in his famous essay, asked, "What is it like to be a bat?" He argued that for a bat, there is a subjective experience, a way of experiencing the world through echolocation that is unimaginable to us humans. The philosopher David Chalmers speaks of the hard problem of consciousness. Why does all the information processing in our brain feel like anything at all? Why do we have an inner, subjective world? Panpsychism offers a radical but elegant answer. Perhaps perception, a kind of primitive, fundamental experience, is not a property that suddenly emerges from nothing at a certain level of complexity. Perhaps it is a fundamental property of matter itself, just like mass or electric charge. Perhaps an electron has a tiny, unimaginably simple spark of experience, an atom a little more, a molecule, a cell, a fungus, a plant. They would all have their own, to us alien, form of what it is like to be. Our complex human consciousness would then not be the invention of the mind, but merely a particularly artful and intense arrangement of this fundamental property. This is not a scientifically proven theory, but a philosophical thought, a way of looking at the universe. But it is a possibility that gains plausibility from the behavior of fungi. If a network without a center can learn and communicate, the idea that it possesses some kind of diffuse, distributed experience is perhaps not so far-fetched. And here, in these deep philosophical waters, a very mundane yet suddenly perplexing question arises, sizzling quietly from the frying pan. Many people choose not to eat meat for ethical reasons. They do not want to cause suffering to a living being that has pain, fear, and an awareness of its existence. The line is usually drawn between the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom. A cow has subjective experience, a head of lettuce does not. But if we now acknowledge that fungi are a networked system that processes information, learns, communicates, and adapts to its environment, if we even consider the possibility that there is a form of primitive experience in this vast underground organism, where does the oyster mushroom stand in our moral equation? Is a salad made of intelligent, communicating beings that we have torn from their network really more ethically sound than a steak? This thought is not intended to cause discomfort or make moral judgments. It is, rather, an invitation to humility. It shows how our carefully constructed ethical systems are based on simplified assumptions that nature itself constantly undermines. Perhaps the moral finger we so readily point at others should transform into a compass that points in all directions at once, including towards our own kitchen, where a silent, complex organism waits to become our meal. What we know for sure is that fungi force us to ask better questions. We do not have final answers to what mind is or where exactly life begins to become complex. But the fact that we must ask these questions by observing a fungus is in itself a profound realization. It expands our horizons and allows us to see the world with new eyes. The question itself is perhaps more valuable than any answer we could find at the moment, because the fungi were already here long before there were eyes to see them. They witnessed the rise and fall of the dinosaurs. They will likely still be here long after our cities have turned to dust. Perhaps they are observing us in their own silent and immeasurably slow way, through millions of kilometers of fine threads growing silently beneath our feet and continuing the great, inaudible conversation of the planet. Outro, the silent network beneath us. And so our journey ends for the moment, on the threshold of this vast, inaudible conversation being held beneath the surface of the world. Together, we have walked a path that has taken us from the smallest spores to organisms that span entire landscapes. It has been a path that has forever changed our ideas of life, intelligence, and community. We remembered the zombie ant, guided by invisible threads, and delved into the wood wide web, which connects the forest into a single community. We marveled at the decentralized intelligence of slime molds, and finally stood in awe before the largest living thing on Earth, an ancient fungus that has been growing in secret for millennia. All these threads have woven together into a profound realization. Fungi are the great recyclers of the planet, turning death into new life. They remind us that strength lies not in isolation but in connection, and that everything is part of a larger network. The next time you walk in the forest, when the light falls through the leaves and the air smells of damp earth, pause for a moment. Feel the ground beneath your feet. Remember, under your every step lies a network older than humanity, an infinitely complex web of life, exchanging information, distributing nutrients, and forming the foundation for the entire forest you see. Every tree, every shrub, every flower is connected to this silent network. You are not just walking over the earth, you are walking over the thoughts and the memory of the forest. If these thoughts and images resonate within you, and you feel that this journey of discovery is not yet over, then you are always welcome here. Our shared space for curiosity and wonder will continue to explore the hidden worlds that lie just beneath our feet or far above our heads. If you would like these stories to continue finding their way to you, then join our circle and become part of this community of dreamers and explorers. Every form of appreciation helps us to continue these journeys and to forge new paths into the unknown. In our collection, you will find other stories that will transport you to other wondrous places, from the depths of the ocean to the distant edges of the cosmos. Each one is an invitation to see the world with different eyes and to find the silence in which the greatest secrets whisper. For the conversation of the forests is but one of many, and our journey has just begun. We will soon set out again to listen to another quiet yet profound dialogue taking place in a completely different corner of the universe. Until then, may your thoughts be vast and your nights restful. That was today's night lesson. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Good night and sleep well.